right, so while we're on the topic of moving, scaling, and rotating, and as you work through this project, let's go ahead and talk about switching the movement space that you're operating in. So I'm going to start a fresh Maya scene by just coming up here to File and New Scene. This will give me a blank scene, and I'm going to go ahead and move the cube here. Okay, so we're going to grab a cube here. I'm going to hit W to move this thing. You can just move it around, and I'm going to go ahead and scale it maybe, and then rotate it. Now, why am I doing this? I want to show you the interactions between different tools. When I hit W, notice that the arrow is pointing upwards. If I hit scale, notice the scale is pointing outwards. And if I hit the rotate, notice it's revolving around the object. I have different spaces at work here inside of my tools. If you recall, I mentioned we could access that tool setting menu up here, and you'll see that it allows us to change the spaces in which we operate. Now, I'm going to close this, and I'm going to show you another trick. You could either use this button, or let's say I want to specifically access my move tools and switch to my move tool. I turned my move tool on by clicking it, and if I double click this, you'll see it'll bring up the tool settings. Now, there are a lot of tool settings for tools inside of Maya, so don't let this overwhelm you. I want you to put up your blinders, and I want you to just look in this top section here, the axis orientation. And you'll see this is currently set to something called world. There's two common spaces that we're going to operate in, world space, and the other one is going to be called object space. Now, with these spaces, we can use them with either tool. And if I leave this tool menu up and I switch to my rotate, you'll see my rotate's an object, and you'll see my scale as an object. This may be completely different than what yours are set to. So I want to give you a heads up on that. If my matching exercise didn't go quite like yours, it might be because your tools are in a different space. Unfortunately, Maya likes to copy my preferences. And even though I did a fresh install, it seems like it kept my old preferences. Now, let's talk about the difference between these spaces and how they operate. They're going to change the orientation of your axes in respect to something. If I go ahead and click the drop-down menu here and switch to Object, you'll see that all of a sudden, my axes start to follow the directionality of my object like the scale and rotate were. You'll also see several others. We're not going to get to those because world and object are really the most useful ones. But what this is going to do is it's going to switch between those spaces. So what does that mean? Well, let's talk about the spaces. Let's go ahead and start off with talking about what world space means. World space means in correlation to the world. So if I had a little character on the world here, and the character was standing here, and we asked the world, where is the character relative to your position? The character would be up, right? But if the character was down, instead, down here, it'd be downwards, right? So it'd be down. So it's in respect to the world itself, okay? So what that means is when we're in world space, up is always up, down is always down, left is always left, right's always left, Z is always forward backwards, no matter what the position of our object is. So in short, world space doesn't care about rotation. So let's say I wanted to just move this straight up and down. World space is going to be the space to do that in because it's relative to the world, it's not relative to the object. So let's go ahead and talk about object space. Object space is aware of the object rather than the world. So let's say we had something like a bottle of soda or whatever this is, and I were to turn the bottle upside down, and I were to ask you, where is the top of the bottle? What's the top of the bottle? You would say, this is the top of the bottle, right? Because that's the top of the bottle. But world space would say that this is the top of the bottle, right? Because whatever side is facing upward is the world. So object space is going to be what is aware of the positioning of the object. So aware of the object relative to itself, okay? So world space is relative to the world, object space is relative to the object. So let's say instead of wanting to move this up here, I wanted to move it in the direction of the tilt of the object, I could switch that to object space, and now you'll see it's going to be moving along the orientation of what's up in respect to the object, rather than in respect to the world. Okay, so that's going to be world space, where everything is always upwards. always sideways, always forward backwards, and object space, which is relative to the object. This applies to all of the channels. So if I come over here to rotate, you'll see we're currently rotating relative to object space. But if I switch to world space, you'll see that it will go back to always up, so on and so forth. Same with scale. And scale is actually a really interesting one because it makes a huge difference in terms of shaping things, if you're using it as that sort of means. But, let's switch to world, and all of a sudden you can get a really weird shape. So that is going to be the two spaces. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, we're ready to start exploring a concept called primitive modeling. So let's go ahead and start creating our first models.